Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast, and welcome to your AEW Dynasty post show, man. And there is a lot to talk about with what happened on Dynasty in today's episode, man. We see MJF defending the AEW World Title against Kenny Omega. We see Tekla defending the AEW Women's Championship. We also see a return on 0 Hour of a long-awaited superstar that we have not seen in over 300 days. We'll talk about that as well at the end of today's show. We had the Young Bucks taking on Takeshita and Okada to open the night. We also see FTR defend the AEW Tag Team Championships against Copeland and Cage. We also see Jericho's return match against none other than Ricochet. We'll talk all about that in today's episode. Before I even get started, man, with the full rundown of this show, man, I just want to talk for a little bit, man. I just want to get some things off my chest here with this show that happened last night. I'm going to be honest, man. I have stressed this shit enough until I've been blue in the face, bro. AEW, I don't know what the fuck happened with AEW as far as the excitement, as far as the intrigue into the show. I don't know if this is something, I want to go back, and I've been saying this for God knows how long now. I don't know if this is something on the lines where Tony Khan did everything that he could up to a point where he was going to re-sign a new contract with Time Warner to give us some of the best storylines, some of the best matches, some of the most memorable moments of all of AEW's history, just for him to get a TV rights deal to a point where once he got that TV rights deal, Tony Khan took his foot off the gas and started pumping the brakes. Meaning that the storylines are lacking, the lack of direction of where this company is going, where talent are going, any intrigue, any solid storyline for these pay-per-views that people are still paying $50 for damn near, any intrigue into why we're watching this show anymore. It's gotten to a point, folks, where at this point now with AEW, what you see is what you get. And, pro wrestling across the board, whether it's WWE, whether it's TNA, whether it's AEW, 2025 has been an abysmal year for pro wrestling. It's been hard to watch. It's been hard to understand. It's been hard to really get excited, really, around pro wrestling. The product itself, as a whole, man, has just took a massive shit. And what we saw last night on Dynasty was pure example of that. I can't even tell you guys that I thought that this was any of these matches were really pay-per-view worthy, maybe besides the main event. Besides the main event last night, I can honestly, genuinely tell you guys I give a rat's ass about this show. Tony Khan is going to continue to give us this quantity over quality shit. Where the show starts at 7 with the 0 Hour, and it does not end till roughly around 12:30 a.m. 6.5 hour show. Where majority of these matches that we saw last night were glorified mid-card or main event, maybe AEW Dynamite matches. There's no story, there's no intrigue, there's no investment into anything that we saw last night besides the main event between MJF and Kenny Omega. And I believe we got about, 8 or 9 matches last night on top of the 0 Hour, which it's fucking ridiculous, man. There was one part of the show last night, and I told you guys before, man, I'm brutally honest with y'all. There was a part of the show last night, and maybe this was just me, or maybe it was y'all even watching the show yourselves, man. There was a part of the show last night where we get to the Dogs defending the Trios titles against the Conglomeration, where the Conglomeration had a mystery partner added to this 6-man tag team matchup for the AEW Trios titles. They had this whole stage set up for the Conglomeration where Orange Cassidy's sitting on the couch, and then they get a knock on the door, and it's none other than the return of Kyle O'Reilly. Great to have you back. Awesome. I'm going to tell you guys right here and now that I honestly gave a shit less about that match. And at that point, I was so goddamn frustrated. Because here we are now going into damn near midnight, and we still got one more fucking match to go. These shows are immensely way too fucking long. Way too long. I understand that Tony Khan is trying to add enough talent to have TV time on these pay-per-views, because at the end of the day, AEW, 9 times out of 10, their pay-per-views are their bread and butter. It's what's keeping the lights on for AEW. Now, I can't say the same thing about last night's pay-per-view, because last night's pay-per-view shit the fucking bed. But usually 9 times out of 10, AEW's pay-per-views are their bread and butter. It's what keeps their fucking lights on. It what pretty much keeps AEW in business at this point, because Dynamite and Collision ain't doing it. But man, we get to that matchup with the conglomeration taking on the Dogs, bro. And at that point, I literally myself was on fumes. I was so goddamn exhausted watching this goddamn pay-per-view last night, because nothing made sense. There was no investment. There was no intrigue into this goddamn pay-per-view. That show last night fucking sucked. I'm sorry. Anybody out here that was like, oh man, that was one of the best AEW pay-per-views of all time, you've lost your fucking mind. You're the problem. You're the reason why people want to sugarcoat shit, and you're the reason why people are just, don't have their own opinions, are not organic, and just trying to kiss Tony Khan's ass. This show last night was a fucking joke. This was a glorified pay-per-view. Not only that, if we're speaking of the War Dogs, they just won those trios titles on Collision, if I'm not mistaken, against beating, I believe, what was it, Speedball Mike Bailey, Kevin Knight, and Mystico, if I'm not mistaken, for the AEW trios titles. Then we get to the match, and then the Dogs lose the titles to the conglomeration. Spoiler. So they didn't even hold the titles more than once. Their first title defense, they lost it. So what does that do for the Dogs? What does that do for David Finlay, Clark Connors, and Gabe Kidd? Doesn't really make them look like a strong unit in AEW, if you honestly ask me. It makes them look like a fucking joke. And you give the belts to the conglomeration, why? Because Kyle O'Reilly returned, knowing that Roderick Strong and Orange Cassidy's been getting their ass beat by the War Dogs? Let's bring in Kyle O'Reilly, and O'Reilly's going to save the day. Because we're in Canada. And we're going to bring him in after he was out with injury. We're going to bring him back or dealing with some issues. And we're just going to give the conglomeration the trios titles when, for the longest time, it's only been O'Reilly Strong and Orange Cassidy. This show made no fucking sense last night. This show was awful. Honestly. And I can't even honestly tell you guys that Kenny Omega and MJF honestly saved this fucking show. To be honest with you, I know a lot of people, which is crazy to think that a lot of people were actually lobbying around Kenny Omega beating MJF last night. I'm going to be honest. MJF shouldn't lose that belt until we get to All In. I'm sorry. He should not lose that belt until we get to All In. Because right now, you got to feed the hot hand. And the hot hand right now is MJF. MJF is also one of the main people right now keeping the doors open for AEW. I'm sorry. That is just I can't be more honest than that. Since that guy has become AEW World Champion, the ratings have gone up. The show is somewhat decent at best. Nobody wants to see Samoa Joe as World Champion. Nobody wants to see Jon Moxley, which again, Moxley, that's a whole other different fucking situation that we'll get into later on in this episode. Because I don't know what the fuck the Death Riders and Jon Moxley are doing at this point, nor Will Ospreay, after what we saw last night. Chris Jericho makes his return to AEW, has his first match back, and gets his ass kicked by Ricochet. We'll talk about that as well, and the direction I think where Jericho was going. We also see Darby Allin and Andrade, which again, I wanted Andrade to beat the dog shit out of Darby Allin, because not for nothing, Andrade's been red hot since he's been back. This is a whole new, improved Andrade. But we see Darby Allin get the win over Andrade. Now Darby seemingly is a new number 1 contender for the AEW World title. We'll talk about that as well, and what I think Darby Allin's going to be doing next, moving forward, also in today's episode. I mean, this shit was a joke, bro. I'm a firm believer, and I'm always going to say this, that it is quality over quantity. We don't need 10 to 15 fucking matches per pay-per-view. You can give me 8 quality matches, or hell, even 5 or 6 quality matches that have story that make fucking sense. At this point, AEW is just adding people to these shows just to give them pay-per-view time. And the matches mean shit. I don't need to see an Alex Windsor versus Marina Shafir match, bro. I give a shit less. I give a rat's ass. I'm sorry. Tekla versus Jamie Hayter, as far as I'm concerned, you're running back a storyline that happened months ago when Tekla made her AEW debut. To have her go up against Jamie Hayter last night. When Jamie Hayter hasn't done shit, and Jamie Hayter's been in a tag team with Alex Windsor with the Brawling Birds. So are the Birds going after the AEW Women's Tag Team Championships, or are they done? Windsor's walking around with the New Japan Strong Women's Championship. So where does that leave Jamie Hayter after she got her ass kicked last night? Here's another thing, too. AEW for the past couple weeks have been in Canada. Mercedes Moné was supposed to be in town. Where's Moné? Moné didn't show up on Dynamite. She didn't show up on Collision. Where's Moné? You know what I mean? What the fuck are we doing here? What are we doing here? Then you see Camille, which again, I didn't even know she was still employed with the fucking company, on the 0 hour. She shows up backstage, beats the shit out of the TBS champion Willow Nightingale, beats the hell out of her and says, I'm back. After being gone for, 356 days or some shit? Come on, bro. We don't even know half these people are employed with the fucking company. Hell, look at the Willie Mack situation. Willie Mack said he's damn near homeless working under AEW and Tony Khan. He ain't getting paid. Meanwhile, Willie Mack is trying to work on the indies just trying to make some money. He just recently did a JCW show not too long ago. We don't even know if these people are, most of these people are on the fucking roster. And they're, Camille's back now after, filming Gladiators. Meanwhile, we saw Wardlow backstage at Revolution. Why was Wardlow not a part of this fucking show? You can't find something for Wardlow to do? You can't book him in a storyline? Hell, at this point, bro, as far as Wardlow's concerned, I would realign him up with MJF. Be MJF's hired muscle. Because everybody's coming after MJF. Why the hell not? The last time we saw Wardlow, he was going to be beefing with Swerve Strickland. Which, again, we didn't see Swerve on Dynasty. I don't know if he's out, taking time off, or he's injured. The only return we got last night on Dynasty was the return of Camille and Kyle O'Reilly. No Jay White, no Keith Lee, nothing. We have a Casino Gauntlet match to crown a new TNT champion since Kyle Fletcher's injured for the next, 6 to 8 months. So we had a Casino Gauntlet match for the vacated TNT title. Not for nothing, I feel like those Casino Gauntlet matches really bring out the people from catering that ain't doing shit. Which we'll talk about that as well in the direction I think where the champion is going next after he's now won the TNT title. It's just, last night was chaotic bullshit, bro. It just was all over the fucking place. Shit didn't make sense. Ospreay takes an L. Jericho takes an L. Don Callis talks about on Dynamite that we might get Takeshita versus Okada if they beat the Bucks at Dynasty at Double or Nothing. Well, guess what? That looks like that might not happen now because Okada and Takeshita lost to the Bucks. So it looks like we're not going to get that match at Double or Nothing. Which these two guys have been beefing for months. Months. A match that the fans are patiently waiting for, and you can't even give us that fucking match. I feel like Double or Nothing is going to run into a lot of fucking rematches from Dynasty, to be honest with you. Because Tony Khan and the powers that be can't book these fucking shows. Can't book Dynamite. Can't book Collision. Can't book shit with no fucking story. I told you guys this before. AEW books this shit like it's WCW 2000 or All Japan Pro Wrestling. They don't give a shit, man. They don't care. What you see is what you get. If you don't like it, then fuck off. That's literally what it is. And once they got that new contract signing for the new TV rights deal, Tony Khan didn't give a fuck what the fans thought. He got his fucking money. He don't give a shit. Clearly. Look at the fucking product, man. What are we doing? What the fuck are we doing here? This shit's a fucking joke, man. A joke. This pay-per-view last night was a glorified Dynamite, at best. This was no pay-per-view. What we got last night was a bunch of bullshit thrown together hoping that something would stick on the wall, and Tony Khan said, oh, you know what, that's a good fucking idea. Let's run with that. No. Let's get off your ass and write a fucking show. Like, it's just fucking pure ass laziness, man. It's a fucking joke. And then you still expect people to fork out $50 fucking to watch this shit. And the only story that we got that was halfway decent was maybe Moxley Ospreay, maybe, and Omega and MJF, which we had the Devil versus the God of Pro Wrestling. Which, not for nothing, I will give credit where credit's due. I thought that was one of the best Omega matches that we've seen in quite some time. I'll give Omega all the credit in the world. When he says he's 100% back, after what I saw last night, I believe it. Omega went through the fucking trenches last night with MJF. And Omega gave it everything that he had. Now, again, MJF does his usual antics during the match, involving the Dynamite down the ring and hitting a low blow and so on and so forth. But Omega, that was probably one of his best matches that I've seen since he's been back in AEW, back from diverticulitis, in my honest opinion. It was a great fucking match. But that's one match out of everything that we've seen from 7 o'clock all the way out until 12:30 at night. Again, quality over quantity. It works every fucking time, bro. It's a recipe that always is going to work. It never fails. I'd rather have 5 matches that actually are worth a damn, that mean something, than 10 to 12 matches that mean jack shit. And AEW and Tony Khan seemingly don't give a shit about that. Let's put on 12 pay-per-view matches, and we'll have this run until about 12:30 at night. Dude, are you fucking insane? On a Sunday night, mind you. It's fucking insane, dude. It's insane. It's absolutely insane, man. But we'll talk more about that at the end of today's episode, man. But let's get into the night. We had the first match of the main card of Dynasty. It's the Young Bucks taking on Okada and Takeshita. I thought it was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between the Bucks and Okada and Takeshita, with Okada and Takeshita keeping the pace of the match. Nick Jackson hits a moonsault to the outside. Takeshita then lands a high boot, taking out Matt Jackson. Don Callis, who was on commentary during this matchup, goes after the eye of Matt Jackson. Matt then hits a blockbuster into a cutter off the apron on Takeshita on the outside. Okada then hits a DDT on Nick Jackson on the outside as well. Okada then mocks the Young Bucks. Takeshita hits an exploder suplex for a near fall. Matt Jackson lands a double bulldog, taking out Okada and Takeshita. The Young Bucks then apply a sharpshooter on Okada and Takeshita in the middle of the ring. Okada looks like he was going to tap, but Takeshita ends up slapping the shit out of Okada, making sure that he does not tap. The hold then is broken. Takeshita and Matt Jackson both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Nick Jackson hitting a springboard hurricanrana, taking out Takeshita. Okada and Takeshita then hit pile drivers on the Young Bucks for a near fall, followed by Takeshita hitting an avalanche German suplex on Matt Jackson. Takeshita then follows it up by hitting a running knee. Okada then hits an elbow drop. Takeshita then hits a Blue Thunder Bomb in the middle of the ring, but Nick Jackson hits a Canadian Destroyer. Takeshita hits a running knee. Bucks and Okada and Takeshita both exchange in the middle of the ring. Okada and Takeshita then get face-to-face in the middle of the ring. Okada and Takeshita then both exchange in the middle of the ring. Takeshita accidentally hits a running knee, taking out Okada. Okada then goes for a Rainmaker, but missed and took out Takeshita. The Bucks then hit a BTE trigger on Okada for a near fall. The Bucks then go for a BTE trigger on Takeshita as well, but another BTE trigger, but Takeshita stops Nick Jackson. Takeshita then lets the Bucks go. The Bucks end up hitting a Meltzer driver on Okada in the middle of the ring, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are the Young Bucks. Hats off to the Young Bucks for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we have Chris Jericho taking on Ricochet. This is Jericho's first match back since he's been in AEW, or returned to AEW. It was a decent match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Jericho and Ricochet, with Jericho keeping the pace of the match. Jericho and Ricochet both exchanged in the middle of the ring, with Ricochet hitting a Death Valley driver off the apron on Jericho on the outside. Tona then attacks Jericho ringside. Jericho then gets up, hits a Lion Salt on Ricochet in the middle of the ring. When Ricochet gets up, hits a Northern Light suplex. Bishop Khan, who was ringside, attacks Jericho with the referee being distracted. This allowed Ricochet to hit another Death Valley driver on Jericho in the middle of the ring. Jericho then gets up, hits a code breaker on Ricochet for a near fall. Jericho and Ricochet then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Jericho hitting a Hurricane Rana off the top rope, taking out Ricochet. Ricochet then gets up, tries to get some offense in by hitting a Northern Light suplex into a brainbuster, followed by Ricochet hitting his signature Vertigo, taking out Jericho for a near fall. Ricochet then goes for a shooting star press, but Jericho counters it quickly with a code breaker for a near fall. Jericho then has Ricochet in the middle of the ring. Jericho applies the walls of Jericho, but Bishop Kong causes a distraction. The hold is broken. Jericho then takes out the man. Tona then attacks Jericho. Ricochet then has a shooting star press on Jericho for a near fall, followed by a spirit gun. And then Ricochet then hits a lion salt of his own, landing on Chris Jericho. Pins for the 3. And your winner of the match is Ricochet. Couple of things I want to talk about with you guys with this matchup, more specifically, Chris Jericho. Number one, I told you guys, man, when Jericho came back to AEW, I think the biggest question for a lot of fans, especially AEW fans, was what's next for Jericho? You know, a lot of people at the time when Jericho took his hiatus, a lot of people thought that Jericho was on his way back to WWE. That's not the case. Jericho ended up showing up back to AEW, has this matchup with Ricochet, and ends up taking a loss in his first match back. Now, it does raise the question now, what's next for Jericho? Are they going to run this shit back between Ricochet and Jericho now that the demand or the Gates of Agony were also involved in this matchup, which ultimately helped Ricochet get the victory over Jericho? Or is Jericho going to move on to greater pastures? Is he going to move on to another opponent? You know, I am concerned with the direction of where Jericho is going. Even though this is his first match back officially, you know, it just doesn't look good right now for Jericho. I feel like we're going to get the same Jericho that we got right before he left. The same learning tree Jericho, just a little, you know, a little bit different, but the same Jericho that we got before he had left. You know, and this is going to run into a problem with Jericho if it's not fixed quick. Because, again, AEW has only been in Canada now for the past couple weeks. Jericho's hometown, his home country. I wonder what the reception is going to be of Chris Jericho when AEW is back in the States. Are they going to yell, please retire, please go away? We haven't seen that yet. We're going to see that this week because Dynamite, I believe, is in Washington State. I think in Everett, Washington, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to find out if the fans' reception of Chris Jericho is the same, or if not better than what he has received since he's come back to AEW in Canada. So it's going to be very telling, bro. I personally, if things don't change for Jericho, bro, I think the Jericho experiment is going to run its course in the next few months, where people once again are going to be begging Jericho to retire. And the fucked up thing about that is Jericho is not going anywhere anytime soon, because Jericho just signed a multi-year deal with AEW. So it's going to be very interesting to see how AEW utilizes Chris Jericho for the foreseeable future. But right now, right out of the gate, man, it is not looking good for Chris Jericho. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Andrade from the Don Callis family taking on Darby Allin. Now, the stipulation of this matchup is if Darby Allin beats Andrade, Darby will seemingly be the new number one contender for the AEW World title. Now, the match itself between Andrade and Darby was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Andrade and Darby, with Andrade keeping the pace of the match. Darby and Andrade fight throughout the crowd. Andrade hits a Three Amigos on Darby Allin, but Darby gets up, hits a stunner on Andrade. Andrade then hits a moonsault maneuver off the top rope, but Darby counters it into a choke hold, and the hold is broken. Andrade then hits a suplex on Darby out of the ring to the outside, looked absolutely brutal. Andrade then hits a running knee for a near fall, followed by a moonsault for a near fall. Andrade and Darby then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Darby hitting a Scorpion Death Drop on Andrade in the middle of the ring. Darby then follows it up by hitting a Coffin Drop for a near fall, but Andrade hits a spinning back fist on Darby for a near fall, but Darby ends up hitting a roll-up on Andrade, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and seemingly new number one contender for the AEW World title is Darby Allin. And we'll talk more about Darby Allin at the end of today's episode. Moving on from that, we have the AEW Tag Team Championship matchup where it is FTR defending the AEW Tag Team titles against Copeland and Cage. Now, I thought this was actually a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between FTR and Copeland and Cage, with Copeland and Cage and FTR both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Cope and Cage are keeping the pace of the match, but Wheeler hits a vintage DDT on Copeland. Cage then hits a low blow on Dax Hardwood, followed by Cage hitting a kill switch on Dax for a near fall. FTR then were going after the injured hand of Christian Cage, but Cage hits a diving headbutt off the top rope. Cope then hits an impaler for a near fall in the middle of the ring, but Wheeler then has the AEW Tag Team titles. Wheeler then hits Cope with the AEW Tag Team titles for a near fall, but Cope and Cage then get up, hit a 3D for a near fall. Copeland now is busted wide open. Hathaway then attacks Christian Cage. FTR then hit a shatter machine on Copeland for a near fall. Referee then pushes Stokely Hathaway out of the ring. Cope then hits a spear for a near fall, but Wheeler hits a pile driver on Adam Copeland. Wheeler then goes to the outside, grabs a chair. Cage then was sent over the timekeeper's table, leaving Copeland all by himself dealing with FTR. FTR then mocked the Young Bucks by hitting super kicks on Copeland in the middle of the ring. But Copeland then gets up, tries to get some last-minute offense in by hitting a spear on FTR, but FTR end up hitting their signature shatter machine in the middle of the ring, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match, and still AEW Tag Team Champions are FTR. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about with this, man. Number one, I was shocked, honestly, with the outcome of this matchup. I thought with AEW Dynasty being in Canada, the return of Copeland and Cage, and how, FTR was owned a receipt after what they did to Beth Copeland at All Out in, I believe, Toronto. I thought this was time overdue for Copeland and Cage to beat FTR and become the new AEW Tag Team Champions. But that did not happen. So I don't know how this is going to play out. If I had to predict how this is going to play out, I could possibly see the idea of Tony Khan in AEW entertaining the idea at Double or Nothing in a triple threat ladder match between these 3 teams: FTR, Copeland and Cage, and the Young Bucks, taking place at Double or Nothing in May. That's where I see things going for FTR. The Bucks got a big win over Okada and Takeshita. Copeland and Cage are going to want their rematch, and FTR are still the AEW Tag Team Champions. So the way things are starting to line up for me is that I can see Tony Khan possibility entertaining the idea of putting on a triple threat ladder match for the AEW Tag Team Championships at Double or Nothing. Because you had to remember, at one time, this is something that Tony Khan was really interested in doing, which was running this, old school ladder match. Because at one time, the Hardy Boys were also a part of the AEW roster, Matt and Jeff, as well as Copeland and Cage. And this was something that Tony Khan was kind of adamant about with putting on a ladder match between these 2 legendary tag teams. Now that the Hardys are gone and working with TNA, that legendary matchup is not going to happen. So what way can we adapt to that and still have a good ladder match, but overcome the fact that the Hardys are no longer with AEW? Well, let's have a triple threat tag team matchup and a ladder match for the AEW tag team titles between FTR, Copeland and Cage, and the Young Bucks. So I think that's going to be next for Copeland and Cage, FTR, as well as the Young Bucks. Moving on from that, we have the TNT Casino Gauntlet match, where the winner of this matchup will be crowned the new TNT champion. Now, Tommaso Ciampa is the first entrant, followed by Rush as the second entrant into the match. The match itself was a good match. There was a back-and-forth matchup between Rush and Ciampa, with Ciampa and Rush both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Bandito is the next entrant in the match. Bandito hits a senton into the corner, followed by Bandito hitting a frog splash for a near fall. Speedball Mike Bailey is the next entrant. Bailey hits a moonsault to the outside, followed by a running shooting star press for a near fall. Bailey and Rush then both exchange, with El Clone from the Don Callis family as the next entrant into the match. El Clone quickly hits a Pele kick on Ciampa. Pac is the next entrant into the match. Pac hits a Black Arrow to the outside, taking everyone out. Bailey hits a Hurricane Rana. Daniel Garcia is also the next entrant into the match, followed by Anthony Bowens. Bowens hits a Famouser on Bandito in the middle of the ring. Pac and Bowens have both exchanged in the middle of the ring. Kevin Knight is the next entrant into this match. Bayley hits a moonsault to the outside. El Clone then hits a coup de grace. Bandito then follows it up by a 21 plex. Wheeler Yuta is the next entrant into the match. Pac then hits a black arrow for a near fall. Garcia then applies a Dragon Tamer on Speedball Mike Bayley, but Kevin Knight hits a UFO splash, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and new TNT champion is Kevin Knight. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about with you guys with this matchup. Number one, I'm not a big fan of the Casino Gauntlet matches, man. I'm just not. I feel like it gives an opportunity for the members of the roster in catering to give them something to do, to be honest with you. I don't think we always need a Casino Gauntlet match to crown a new champion if the champion's injured. I think there's other ways to go about that, to crown a new number one contender or crown a new TNT champion. Was I shocked with the outcome of this match? Not entirely. You know, I have high praise for Kevin Knight. I told you guys when Kevin Knight made his AEW debut that the guy's got talent. It's how is AEW going to push him as a single superstar? And now they are. With the fact that he has TNT Championship gold around his waist, they are pushing Kevin Knight, which I think is fantastic. Kevin Knight is an underrated talent. Kevin Knight is a future AEW World Champion if they utilize him correctly. Now, with that being said, it was interesting to see how that match finished. Now, we see Daniel Garcia apply a Dragon Tamer on Speedball Mike Bayley. Bayley was getting ready to tap out. But then we see Kevin Knight go to the top rope hit that UFO splash and get that cover for the 1-2-3 and win the match and become the new TNT champion. So, there was a couple of things that kind of popped in my head to see how this was going to play out for Kevin Knight. Number one, are we slowly starting to see now, possibly, the end of Jet Speed? Are we going to see the end of Kevin Knight and Speedball Mike Bayley as a tag team? Is Mike Bayley going to get pissed off with what happened with Kevin Knight and the fact that Kevin Knight cost him the TNT title? Is there going to be a little inner turmoil here between Jet Speed? Now, the other thing that I was thinking about too, and call me a conspiracy theorist if you want to, but just hear me out. The Hurt Syndicate, Bobby Lashley, MVP, and Shelton Benjamin are looking for a fourth member to add to the Hurt Syndicate. Now, some people have mentioned Isaiah Cassidy being a part of the Hurt Syndicate due to the fact that Mark Quinn is unfortunately injured and he is going to be out for the foreseeable future. So it kind of leaves Isaiah Cassidy in the dust as far as, you know, him being on television. So a lot of people are pointing the finger towards Isaiah Cassidy being the fourth member of the Hurt Syndicate. I'm going to throw a curveball out here for y'all. What if we get a babyface, or if you want to call him heel, Kevin Knight, now that he's TNT champion, and Kevin Knight joins MVP, Bobby Lashley, and Shelton Benjamin as the fourth member of the Hurt Syndicate. Now, to me, on paper, it sounds fantastic. Kevin Knight's an upcoming star, upcoming superstar. He has a lot of time left on his belt. He's still a very young talent, and he has all the tangibles in the world to be AEW World Champion. Bringing in someone like Kevin Knight into the Hurt Syndicate, and having, you know, MVP be the mouthpiece for Kevin Knight, just like he is for Bobby Lashley, just like he is for Shelton Benjamin. I can see that happening for Kevin Knight, because I can see Kevin Knight getting, you know, a mid-card push or even a main event push here in AEW now that he is currently TNT champion. So again, call me a conspiracy theorist if you want to, but I would not be completely shocked if the new TNT champion himself, Kevin Knight, didn't align himself with the Hurt Syndicate. So again, hopefully we see something and see how this is going to unravel or unfold between Kevin Knight and Speedball Mike Bayley, leading us into this week's Dynamite. But like I said, bro, I'm calling it now. Don't be shocked if Kevin Knight's not the fourth member of the Hurt Syndicate. Just saying, just throwing it out there. Speaking of championship matches, we have the AEW Women's Championship on the line. We have Tekla defending the AEW Women's title against Jamie Hayter. Now, the match itself, it was a decent match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Tekla and Jamie Hayter, with Hayter landing a big boot quickly, taking out Tekla. But Tekla quickly gets up, hits a spear, taking out Jamie Hayter. Tekla then was keeping the pace of the match, with Tekla hitting a DDT on Hayter off the ramp. Tekla then follows it up by hitting a big boot. Hayter gets up, hits a suplex off the apron on Tekla. followed by Hayter hitting a devastating Liger bomb for a near fall. Hayter then hits a tombstone for a near fall. Tekla then gets up, hits a spider suplex, followed by Tekla hitting a roll up using the ropes. The referee doesn't see it, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, and still AEW Women's Champion, is Tekla. After the match, you can see Alex Windsor rushing down to the ring. She's telling the referee that Tekla had her hands on the ropes, but the referee says that he didn't see it, and the match was done, and it's official that Tekla had won the match. So again, interesting stuff there between Tekla and Jamie Hayter. Moving on from that, we have a Continental Championship matchup where it is Jon Moxley defending the Continental title against Will Ospreay. Now, the match itself I thought was a good match. Ospreay quickly hits a hidden blade, followed by another hidden blade on Jon Moxley. Ospreay was keeping the pace of the match with Moxley looking distraught, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Ospreay then was raining down vicious elbows on Moxley in the middle of the ring, but Moxley gets up, hits a paradigm shift on Ospreay on the outside. Ospreay and Moxley then both exchange in the middle of the ring with Ospreay hitting a Pele kick, taking out Jon Moxley. Ospreay then goes to the outside, hits a springboard forearm strike, taking out Moxley. Ospreay then goes for a springboard, but Moxley counters it with a forearm strike, taking out Ospreay. Ospreay then gets up, quickly hits a Spanish fly on Moxley, but Moxley applies a choke on Will Ospreay. Moxley then hits a pile driver for a near fall, but Ospreay then hits a power bomb for a near fall as well. Moxley hits another paradigm shift. Ospreay then hits another hidden blade. Ospreay then gets up, hits a Styles Clash for a near fall, followed by a hidden blade for a near fall. Moxley and Ospreay fight on the outside, with Moxley hitting a devastating pile driver on Ospreay off the steel steps. AEW Medical is checking on Ospreay ringside. Moxley then hits 3 paradigm shifts on Ospreay for a near fall, followed by Moxley hitting a Death Rider on Will Ospreay, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, and still Continental Champion, is Jon Moxley. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about with this matchup specifically, man. I was shocked with the outcome of Will Ospreay losing this matchup, to be honest with you. I am. I thought this was Will Ospreay's match to win. The fact that he did not hesitate at all to hit 2 hidden blades, taking out Jon Moxley. Moxley looking distraught, wondering what the hell is going on. Moxley was getting his ass beat for a little while there during that matchup. But I will say this, man, the amount of pile drivers and paradigm shifts and the Death Rider that Ospreay received on landing on his neck, bro. I hate saying this, bro, but it's only a matter of time until somebody gets legitimately seriously injured in one of these matches. That pile driver that Moxley landed on Ospreay on the steel steps, bro, looked absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal. But now the biggest question is, what's next for Jon Moxley and what's next for Will Ospreay? If I had to guess, as far as Will Ospreay is concerned, Will Ospreay is most likely going to enter the Owen and be a favorite to win the Owen, which will hopefully grant Will Ospreay an opportunity at MJF for the world title, where Ospreay cashes in that Owen championship belt, or the opportunity to cash in for a world title opportunity at this year's All In. That's the match to make, where Ospreay would go over, beat MJF, and Ospreay becomes a new AEW world champion. Now, there are other things going on behind the scenes that might curveball that, which we'll talk about here at the end of today's show. But again, to me, Ospreay losing this matchup, Ospreay goes into the Owen, wins the Owen, and that gets him an opportunity at the AEW world title. Now, Jon Moxley, I'm going to be honest, bro. I don't know what's next for Jon Moxley. I think everybody is sick and tired of the Death Riders. I think a lot of people are getting sick and tired of Jon Moxley. We don't know if one time he's a babyface or next he's a heel. We know he's in a heel stable, but he comes off as a babyface. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on with Jon Moxley. Moxley and the Death Riders, hopefully they can see the writing on the wall and know that the Death Rider situation needs to come to an end. Hopefully, because honestly, man, I don't know what's next for Jon or the Death Riders for that matter, because at this point, at this juncture of AEW, I honestly can tell you, I don't think anybody legitimately gives a rat's ass about Jon Moxley and the Death Riders, to be honest. But again, we'll see what happens on AEW Dynamite coming up this week. And moving on from that, we have a trios title matchup where it is the Conglomeration versus the Dogs. Now, The Dogs are defending the AEW Trios titles. They just beat Speedball Mike Bailey, Kevin Knight, and Mystico to become new Trios champions. So, originally this matchup was scheduled between Roderick Strong and Orange Cassidy taking on the Dogs, with the conglomeration having a mystery partner. Now, a lot of people were speculating it was going to be Ishii, it was going to be Mark Briscoe, but that partner is none other than the return of Kyle O'Reilly. Kyle O'Reilly joins Roderick Strong and Orange Cassidy. Now, the match itself was a decent match. It was a back-and-forth matchup with the conglomeration keeping the pace of the match. O'Reilly ends up applying an ankle lock in the middle of the ring. Referee ends up sounding for the bell, and your winners of the match and new Trios champions are the conglomeration. Hats off to the conglomeration for getting the win in this matchup. And moving on from that, we go into our main event of AEW's Dynasty. It is MJF defending the AEW World title against the God of Pro Wrestling himself, Kenny Omega. Now, again, the entrances for these for Omega and MJF were absolutely awesome. It definitely played into the Devil versus the God of Pro Wrestling. I thought it was awesome. The aesthetics were great. I thought the entrance music was awesome. I thought the overall production of it was really put together very well. But the match itself was a good match. Probably one of Kenny Omega's best matches since he's been back after dealing with diverticulitis. So back and forth matchup. Omega hits a Hurricane Rana, followed by Omega hitting a moonsault off the barricade, taking out MJF. Omega then hits a foot stomp off the apron using a table, landing on MJF, but MJF gets up, hits an Alabama slam on Omega in the middle of the ring for a near fall. MJF then hits a pile driver for a near fall, but Omega hits a Snapdragon suplex on MJF. Omega then hits a moonsault for a near fall, followed by a Snapdragon suplex, followed by a Poison Rana. Omega then goes for a one-wing angel, but MJF counters it with a Poison Rana of his own. Omega then hits a running knee for a near fall, but MJF gets up, hits a cutter on Omega for a near fall. Omega then hits a powerbomb, followed by a Hurricane Rana. Omega then hits a moonsault to the outside, followed by an avalanche one-winged angel, landing on MJF. Omega then hits a V-trigger, followed by a Snapdragon suplex, but MJF gets up, tries to get some offense in by hitting a crossroads on Kenny Omega. MJF then follows it up by a pile driver for a near fall, but Omega gets up, hits a V-trigger, followed by another V-trigger. Omega then goes for a V-trigger again, but accidentally takes out the referee. MJF then capitalizes on this by hitting a low blow on Omega. MJF then goes towards the referee. He gets the Dynamite Diamond Ring. Omega then hits a jumping knee, but Omega hits a one-winged angel on MJF for a near fall. MJF then hits Omega with the Dynamite Diamond Ring, followed by MJF hitting a tombstone off the apron through a table ringside. And then MJF hits his signature Heat Seeker on Kenny Omega, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, and still AEW World Champion, is MJF. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about with you guys, man, when it pertains to Dynasty before I get the hell up out of here. I also want to talk about, which I forgot to mention more in detail, Darby Allin. Now, Darby Allin had a match scheduled for Dynasty against Andrade. Now, the match itself was a decent match. Andrade beat the shit out of Darby, but Darby ended up becoming victorious in this matchup, where now Darby Allin is the new number one contender, seemingly, for the AEW World title. Now, I told you guys about this before, man, when it pertains to Darby Allin. Darby Allin, in my honest opinion, the opportunity for Darby to be AEW World Champion right now, it's kind of blew past him. I told you guys when I did my AEW review last week that AEW could have struck while the iron was hot with Darby when, I believe it was Wrestle Dream in Tacoma, Washington. I've said this a million times, where Darby could have faced off against Bryan Danielson, Darby could have beat Bryan Danielson, and Darby became the first time ever for him, AEW World Champion in his home state. Just makes sense. Now here we are in 2026, and Darby is trying to go after the AEW World title once again. Now, I'm going to be honest, man. I mean, my standpoint with Darby is the same. I think Darby's a great talent. I think Darby is one of those guys that, when you think of AEW, you think of Darby Allin. And there's no disrespect about that at all. Now, do I believe that Darby Allin deserves an AEW World title shot? Absolutely fucking not. I'm sorry. We're talking about a guy that one time was probably one of the best things going in AEW. And this was around the time roughly when he was teaming up with Sting. And Sting was on his retirement tour. Obviously, Sting had his retirement match at Revolution and then rode off to the sunset and retired. That was some of the best parts of Darby Allin's career as far as what he's done in AEW. Hands down. You know, Sting rode off in the sunset. He retired, and then Darby took some significant time off to climb Mount Everest. Now, it probably wasn't the best timing for Darby to do this because Darby was red hot after Sting had left. A lot of people wanted to know what was next for Darby, but Darby took some time off, took a hiatus, and decided to climb Mount Everest, which, again, is a huge accomplishment. So, kudos to Darby Allin. But it didn't really, benefit him as far as being an in-ring talent for AEW. And now, since he's been back, he's been dealing with the Death Riders, he's been getting his ass kicked by Gabe Kidd and the Dogs. And now that he beat Andrade, now he gets Darby Allin an opportunity at the AEW World title. And this is why I said earlier about Kenny Omega and MJF and Will Ospreay. This is where Ospreay can run into a problem. Even if he wins the Owen, how is this going to look if Darby Allin beats MJF? Now that Darby Allin's a new number one contender for the AEW World title. So, again, it's going to be very interesting to see how the World title picture plays out over the next couple weeks. But I can honestly tell you guys right now that Darby Allin has done nothing to really deserve an opportunity at the AEW World title, even after he beat Andrade. Andrade should have beat the piss out of Darby. And Andrade should have been a new number one contender for the AEW World title because people want to see MJF versus Andrade. Not Darby Allin versus MJF. It's just getting old, man. It's getting stale. And honestly, it's getting stale. And I don't know, man. I thought Copeland and Cage were going to beat FTR last night. Obviously, that didn't happen. I can see a triple threat ladder match for the AEW Tag Team Championships at Double or Nothing between the Bucks, Copeland and Cage, and FTR for the AEW Tag Team titles. I can see that happening as far as the direction next for FTR. But this was a glorified Dynamite last night, bro. I said that in the beginning of the show. This is a glorified Dynamite that was a pay-per-view. I didn't see any really interest or intrigue into the show besides the main event that I can honestly get behind and actually be a fan of. A lot of these matches that we saw on Dynasty last night were glorified main events for Dynamite or Collision. That's because Tony Khan is a firm believer of quantity over quality. Let's give the fans 12 to 15 matches that mean jack shit when all we need is maybe 5 or 6 matches that have good storylines. That's it. Just tell us a goddamn story so we can get some intrigue and some investment into the AEW product. It's not hard to understand, and it's not hard to comprehend. But it's something that seemingly eludes AEW every single fucking time. All we want is story, man. The when, the where, and the why. That's it. For us fans to get invested in your product. Because right now, you're just throwing shit against the wall hoping something sticks. That's pretty much what AEW Dynamite in its entirety is. Trying to turn chicken shit into chicken salad. That's pretty much it. And it's a shame, bro, because at one time AEW in the very beginning was some of the best wrestling, some of the best storylines in all professional wrestling. And as the years went on, I feel like AEW has progressively and slowly gotten worse and worse and worse over time. And I just wish things would change for AEW where they can get back to kind of what brought them to the dance, man. Tell some story, get some intrigue, get some investment from the fans into your product. You know what I mean? If AEW's bread and butter and what's keeping the lights on to these pay-per-views, we can't have what we had last night. Because if we continue to have what we had last night, this company's not going to last, bro. Because I can tell you right now, a lot of people didn't give a rat's ass about AEW Dynasty last night. It was all over the place. It was lazy. It was lackadaisical booking. And a lot of people didn't give a rat's ass about the matches they saw on AEW Dynasty last night. There needs to be change. There needs to be something different. And I've been saying this and I've been preaching this about AEW now for months, if not years up to this point. There needs to be change. There needs to be direction. There needs to be creative. There needs to be long-term booking for AEW. There needs to be long-term storylines to get the fans invested into these matches. So the fans are willing to fork out $50 goddamn dollars to watch these pay-per-views because they're intrigued by the story that you guys are telling. A story right now that you guys are not even willing to entertain nor do to get the fans currently invested into your product. AEW right now, what it is what you see is what you get. And like I said before, if you don't like it, there's the door. Fuck off. And it's a shame, bro, because they have the talent. We just want story. That's it. And like I said before, the way things are going for WWE right now, AEW can strike the iron when the iron's hot right now. Build some story, build some momentum, and get the fans rallied around AEW's product. But it's like Tony Khan you refuse to do it. You just don't want to do it. You want to play it safe. You want to play it at status quo and then be like, you know what? This is what we're going to get. This is what AEW product is from the foreseeable future from here on out. And it's not enough. It's not enough. We need change. We need direction. We need storyline. We need intrigue into this product. That's it. If you had that, then AEW would be back to what it was. With some intrigue, with some storyline. At one time, like I told you guys before, AEW showcased some of the best storylines in all professional wrestling in the very beginning of AEW's existence. What happened to that? Why are you guys getting lazy as time goes on? You know what I mean? Build a show, bro. Build a story. Build the when, the where, and the why. And I'm telling you guys right now, the fans will be invested. But the powers that be and Tony Khan just don't give a rat's ass what the fans think. Tony Khan is booking this show for himself. And that is it. And because of that, AEW is suffering week in and week out. And I hate saying this too, as far as Dynasty is concerned, this might be one of the worst pay-per-views so far in 2026. I said that, Revolution was not that bad, but this pay-per-view last night might go down so far as the worst pay-per-view for AEW in all of 2026. But with that being said, though, this is my review of AEW's Dynasty. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.